They were the team everyone fell in love with before a ball was even kicked. The dark horses, the dangerous floaters nobody wanted to draw. On paper, Turkey had one of the most exciting young squads on the entire planet. Gifted, fearless, captained by a generation of golden talents that pundits swore would light up the 2026 World Cup. And then, the World Cup actually started. And Turkey did something so spectacularly bad that it will be remembered long after the winners are forgotten. Across their group games, Turkey fired in 62 shots, 62, and scored 0 goals. None. They became the first team eliminated from the entire tournament, bottom of their group, 0 points, sent home while half the planet was still learning the stadiums. The most hyped dark horse at the World Cup managed the most shots without a single goal that the tournament has seen since 1966. This is the story of the biggest shocks of the 2026 World Cup group stage. The giants who humiliated themselves, and the tiniest nations on Earth who refused to go home. Because this is what the group stage does, every single time. It takes the teams we anoint, the fashionable picks, the names with pedigree, and it drags them out in front of the whole world and exposes them. And at the same time, it hands a microphone to countries you'd struggle to find on a map. The 2026 World Cup is the biggest in history. 48 teams, 3 host nations, more games than ever, and it has delivered the most chaotic group stage in living memory. So let's go through the carnage. Start with Turkey, because their fall was the most painful of all. This was not a team that scraped in and got found out. This was a team being seriously tipped to reach the latter stages, a side built around a golden generation, the kind of players the biggest clubs in Europe fight over. The expectation wasn't just to qualify, it was to thrill. And the football gods have a special kind of cruelty reserved for the overhyped. Turkey dominated the ball. They peppered the goal. 62 shots is not the number of a team that parked the bus and got unlucky. It's the number of a team that battered the door for 90 minutes and could not, for the life of them, kick it open. Wave after wave, blocked, saved, skied, dragged wide. And to add insult to injury, the new World Cup rules buried them. With the expanded format, the first tiebreaker is now the head-to-head record, not goal difference. And Turkey, with nothing in the bank, had no way back. 0 points. First team out. A golden generation, gone before it began, having turned 62 chances into the most embarrassing goose egg of the tournament. And Turkey were not the only team executed by the small print. This is the first World Cup with 48 teams, and to make the new maths work, FIFA quietly changed the rules. When teams finish level on points, the first thing that now separates them is not goal difference, the way it has been for decades, but the head-to-head result between them. It sounds like a footnote. It worked like a guillotine. Across the group stage, team after team did the calculations they had done their entire lives, assumed a big win or a tidy goals against column would save them, and discovered too late that the ground had shifted under their feet. Turkey, Tunisia, and others all found themselves on the wrong side of a rule most fans could not even explain, sent home by a tiebreaker instead of a result on the pitch. The most modern World Cup in history, quietly eliminating teams with the fine print. If Turkey were the most humiliating, our next casualty was the most respected. Senegal, an African superpower, a team with genuine pedigree, fancied by many to be the African side that finally went deep. And instead, they walked straight into a buzzsaw. Because Norway are back. Norway, who had not graced a World Cup since 1998, who spent an entire generation watching from home, finally returned to the big stage, and they brought a monster with them. Erling Haaland, one of the most feared strikers alive, had never in his career played at a World Cup. His country simply kept failing to qualify, so when he finally arrived, he arrived hungry. 4 goals in his first 2 games, and one of those braces helped tear Senegal apart. The African giants, beaten by France, then dismantled by a rampant Haaland, packed their bags and went home early, undone by a man who had waited his whole life for this and was not about to waste a second of it. And spare a thought for what this meant for Haaland himself. For years he had been a cheat code in club football, breaking records and terrorizing the best defenses in Europe, and yet every World Cup summer he was a spectator, forced to watch lesser players live the one dream he could not reach, because Norway, for nearly 3 decades, simply could not get there. There is no stage in the sport bigger than the one he kept being denied. So when Norway finally qualified, and Haaland finally walked out at a World Cup, it was less like a debut and more like a dam breaking. 4 goals in 2 games, a man making up for 28 years of absence in 90-minute bursts. Senegal just happened to be standing in front of him when the flood came, and they were not alone in the departure lounge. Tunisia, another proud footballing nation, were picked off and sent out. And then there was the most quietly humiliating exit of the lot, Qatar. Cast your mind back just 4 years. Qatar hosted the entire World Cup. Now, at the very next tournament, they crashed out of the group stage with a single, solitary point to their name, their only moment of joy a shock draw. From hosting the planet's biggest event to being one of its first eliminated. Add a European side in Czechia, sinking to the bottom of their group, and a pattern emerges. At this World Cup, your reputation buys you absolutely nothing. And then there is the strangest new wrinkle of all. With 32 of the 48 teams advancing, every group winner, every runner-up, and the 8 best third-placed sides, the group stage turned into a giant tournament-wide spreadsheet. Teams would finish their games and then have to sit and wait, sometimes for days, doing frantic arithmetic, not knowing if a third-place finish was good enough to sneak through compared to some other third-place team 3 time zones away. It created chaos, and it created hope. Suddenly, finishing third was not elimination. It was a lottery ticket. Minnows clung to it. Giants gambled on it. And the maths ran right down to the final whistle of the final night. But here's the twist. Here's what made this group stage truly unforgettable. Because while the big names were drowning, the smallest countries on the face of the earth were busy writing fairy tales that sound completely made up. Meet Cape Verde, an archipelago of 10 little islands off the west coast of Africa, with a population of around 525,000 people, smaller than a mid-sized city. They had never been to a World Cup in their history. This was their debut. And they did not come to make up the numbers. Cape Verde dug in, drew game after game, refused to lose. And when the dust settled on the group stage, this tiny nation of 500,000 had become the smallest country ever to reach the knockout rounds of a World Cup. Let that sink in. Bigger, richer, more famous footballing nations were flying home in disgrace, and a chain of volcanic islands most fans had never watched play was marching into the last 32. Spain who? In Cape Verde, they believe. And astonishingly, Cape Verde were not even the smallest story at this World Cup. That record belongs to Curaçao, a Caribbean island with a population of around 156,000 people. That is not a typo. 156,000. Curaçao became, by both population and land area, the smallest nation ever to qualify for a men's World Cup, breaking a record that had stood with Iceland. They are nicknamed the Blue Wave. They are coached by the 70-something Dutch managerial legend Dick Advocaat, and they were assembled in large part from players with island heritage scattered across the football world. A speck in the Caribbean, a place you could drive across in an afternoon, standing on the same stage as Brazil, Argentina, and France. The very fact that they were there at all is one of the greatest underdog stories the tournament has ever produced. And let's not forget South Africa. Bafana Bafana, a nation with a complicated, often heartbreaking World Cup history, who had never managed to escape their group when it mattered, finally did it. For the first time ever, South Africa powered through to the knockout rounds, sending a country into raptures. Put it all together, and the bottom of the World Cup's food chain has never looked so alive. A debutant archipelago of 500,000 in the last 32. The smallest nation in World Cup history, taking its place among the giants. A returning Norway, 28 years out in the cold, suddenly one of the most watchable teams in the whole tournament. For every golden generation that choked, there was a country of part-time dreamers having the time of their lives. That is the trade the World Cup always makes, and in 2026, it made it louder than it ever has. So what on earth is going on? Why has this World Cup turned the form book into confetti? Part of it is the new expanded format. 48 teams, brutal travel across an entire continent, sweltering summer heat in 3 different countries, and those new tiebreaker rules that punish any team that stumbles out of the blocks. But part of it is something simpler, and something the World Cup teaches us over and over and refuses to let us forget. The gap between the giant and the minnow has never been thinner. Tactics travel, belief travels. A tiny nation that defends for its life and takes its one chance can break the heart of a superpower that took 62 shots and forgot how to score. So with the group stage roaring into its final night, look at the 2 ends of the table and tell me football isn't the most beautifully unfair sport on earth. Turkey had the golden generation, the hype, and 62 shots, and they go home with nothing. Cape Verde had 500,000 people and a dream, and they go to the knockout rounds. Qatar hosted the last World Cup and watched this one from the sofa within a fortnight. The reputations, the rankings, the price tags, the World Cup has shredded all of it in a single, glorious, chaotic week. And now the real knives are coming out. The group stage is almost done. The round of 32 is about to begin. And if these last few wild weeks have taught us anything, it's this. At the 2026 World Cup, absolutely nobody is safe.